Hello, my name is Andy Simon. I have the honor to be the Master of Ceremonies for this event, and I welcome you. I welcome you to this ceremony for a wonderful person that we all knew. Don wrote down some ideas about what this ceremony was for, and I want to read them to you. To shoulder each other's grief from the death of Barbara Nolfi. To that end, we have tissues at the end of rows. Feel free to use them. To rediscover and share our connections and stories from knowing Barbara. To determine for ourselves what Barbara's legacy was and what part of that we want to carry forward. To celebrate the richness of Barbara's life and the ways knowing her enriched us. And since it's a celebration of community, I want to add to celebrate and nurture the community, love, and solidarity we have woven together over the course of our lives. There are some logistical things that we need to get clear. One is please silence your phones if you haven't already. The other is that there are, of course, bathrooms in this building, not the most easy to get to, though there is one if you go out the door and to the right. There's one right there around the corner. The other ones are one floor down and that way. There's a code, but the code is written on the door. As you may have discovered already, the elevator right here is not working. So to get down to floor 2, you have to go down the stairs or go that way to the elevator that's this way and go down to 2. And you'll find the bathrooms. It's well signed. We have a program, and I hope you've gotten one. We will start with Hannah and Grace, and their reflections. And then we're going to have a group of people who are going to come up and sit in these chairs, and each with a specific reflection story about Barbara and their experience with her. Then we actually have a special surprise guest who's going to be added to that group. After a short pause, a musical pause, with slides. We're going to try an experiment of being in groups of 4 and taking turns telling a 1-minute story about Barbara to your group. So this is one way. All of you who do not have a chair here will be able to talk about Barbara. The other way is that we're having a reception after the ceremony, and that's another place to laugh and cry and tell stories about Barbara and your connection with her. Thank you for being here.
Hello. My name is Grace, and I'm Barbara's granddaughter. You all probably knew her as some variation of Barbara, but I knew her as Baba, because, of course, Baba goes with Papa, and later, Binana. I think she loved these names, although I didn't always know for sure. In fact, I wasn't certain until I read something she had written. She said, "I love being with our children and their children. Play with them is wonderful." I was Binana's oldest grandchild, and so I had the privilege of having her at my high school graduation last spring. During the ceremony, she sat with Papa in a tent set up in the field where the ceremony was taking place. As her Parkinson's progressed, her processing time had gotten longer, and I was worried that in the brief moments I would be walking past her, she wouldn't see or recognize me. A few times, this was true. Although I waved, only Papa waved back. Finally, it was time to receive my diploma. As I walked off the stage and passed the two of them again, I waved one more time. In response, I got 2 waves back, and Binana yelled, "It's Grace! Hi, Grace!" while Papa took my picture. As I'm sure you've all been hearing and will continue to hear, my Binana was very intelligent. As such, I think it's appropriate that I end with a scientific concept, specifically the conservation of matter. This principle states that mass cannot be created or destroyed, only transferred from one form to the next. This means that we are made from the material from the beginning of the universe, and eventually our atoms will rejoin the universe. Binana's atoms are now doing just that and becoming something else. But how wonderful is it that the universe expressed itself as her for a little while? Thank you.
Hi. For those of you who don't know me or haven't seen me since I was a little girl, I'm Hannah Schramm Murray. I was Barbara's stepdaughter and Don's daughter, and Grace is my daughter, and I'm so proud. Before I begin the retrospective of Barbara's life that's about to occur and her impact on others by talking about her early years, I'd like to take a moment to speak about what I consider to be her personal legacy to me. When Barbara came into my life, I was 4 years old. It was apparent, even then, that she did not fit into my existing trope of what it meant to be a woman. Although fun and lively, Barbara was not particularly maternal or soft. She was not snuggly and loving. Instead, she was strong. Barbara had a directness that never minced words, always told people what she felt was right, that was unafraid and unapologetic. There were many interactions over the years with others in which Barbara would say how she really felt, and I would cringe as conversations came to a dead halt. All dropped bombs leave clouds, and Barbara's remarks were no exception to the rule. In this case, the cloud was a temporary moment of anger, dismay, or sadness on the part of the listener. Sometimes that cloud lasted for a moment, sometimes weeks. However, more often than not, once those clouds dispersed, something miraculous happened. Respect would take its place. I think that this respect came from two places. First, that Barbara was willing to say the hard thing if she felt it was right. We've all been there. You have to be really brave to do that. And second, that Barbara respected the other person's ability to deal with the hard stuff being said to them. You earn respect by showing respect. And although the immediate reaction sometimes interrupted this process, ultimately the process won out time and again. I'm not going to sugarcoat things here. In my adult life, I have strived to be more tactful than Barbara often was. I work out in my head in advance how to say things out of a place of love, believing in the maxim, you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar. But what has lasted for me of Barbara's legacy, sorry, I thought I was going to be at the podium, is a willingness to take a deep breath and say the hard thing, say the right thing, to say the thing that no one else will say. This has served me exceptionally well over the years, and I will always, always be grateful to Barbara for being the brave warrior who modeled that behavior to me again and again. So now let me tell you about Barbara's early years. Barbara was born in Bryan, Texas on July 28, 1942. She was the second child of Frederick McIntosh Smith and Catherine Klein. She was proud of being an enrolled member of the Muskogee Creek Nation through her father's family. All her life, she insisted on being called Barbara, refusing any nicknames except for her child one, Barbara Ritz. Barbara grew up in rural Oklahoma and Southern California. She was the second child with an older brother, Edward, 4 years her elder, and twin siblings, Janet and George, who were 3 years younger. They grew up in a loving and supportive family. Both of Barbara's parents had PhDs in chemistry and were lifelong learners. Even as a child, Barbara displayed insatiable curiosity and a thirst for knowledge. She studied for 2 years at Pomona College, then switched to the University of California, Berkeley, where she majored in psychology and graduated in 1965 with a Phi Beta Kappa key. This was a rare academic distinction during that time, as only 50 keys were given out by Berkeley from 1960 to 1970. There she met and married Jim Nolfi, who was a graduate student. After graduation, she worked as a social worker in Oakland while Jim did research in marine biology. In 1968, Barbara gave birth to their son Dylan, and her life drastically changed. As for so many women during that time, and if we're being honest, even now, the demands of childcare fell on her time, and her time for herself grew short. Her insatiable curiosity was stifled. This may explain Barbara's entry in her early journal on an otherwise blank page. Bitter is the woman. Barbara, Jim, and Dylan moved to Vermont in 1969, which is the year of Woodstock, where Jim had a teaching job in UVM's zoology department. Soon after their arrival, they, along with others, started the Earthworks Commune in Franklin, Vermont. At the Commune, Barbara realized the value of living together and sharing resources. She described this period of her life as being freed up from the loneliness of being a young mom by living with other women and children. Smashing monogamy was also part of the 60s counterculture, and Barbara and Jim's marriage did not survive. Barbara stayed on the Commune for 2.5 years and then moved to Westford, Vermont, where she shared a house with her friends and their children. This was the beginning of a life full of cooperative living.
Maybe the panel could come up, would be great. Oh, right, okay.
Should I play that now?
Yeah. We're going to play a short video before people speak.
Back in 1970, when there were a lot of back-to-the-land communes in Vermont, we had something called a tribal gathering. And people came from all over the state and gathered on a hill in a farmland. And we talked about all the things that we wanted to see in our community. And among those was a food co-op, a newspaper, and a free clinic. All right, all those things happened. The co-op started as a pre-order, and when I lived on the commune, we actually we were the first organic farmers that tried to bring produce to the co-op, but unfortunately our crop failed. We didn't know how to grow things without pesticides. So for a while, all these organizations were down on the corner of North Winooski Avenue and North Street. Babipa, the People's Free Clinic, PACT was there. I was Real Seeds were right down here, and now we're closer to it again. And the dream has really grown.
We're going to just stand up in front of the chairs. So we're going to just stand up. Sure. Stand
Okay.
up and use the handheld mic.
Okay. Yes. My name is Lou Andrews, and in the old days when I was married and started living on the commune, it was Lou Pratt. Barbara is the one. That's the title of my little offering today. Barbara was the one. I met Barbara in the summer of 1969 when our young husbands began their teaching careers at UVM. Jim and Barbara lived with Charlie and me in one of the grand old officers' quarters at the fort in Colchester. Barb and Jim, we used to call Barbara Barb sometimes when we wanted to tease her, because we know she really didn't care for it all that much. But Barb and Jim had come to Vermont to start a commune on a farm yet to be purchased. Their friends, Bruce and Mary Pat, would arrive soon after from California to join our shared living space and the communal endeavor. After searching for the right property to purchase, Barbara was the one who found a farm in Franklin, which became our home. We moved into the little farmhouse on February 1st, 1970. That winter, there was a record snowfall. I remember walking through a 7-foot snow tunnel from the house to the milk house to do chores. It was not the ideal time to move. We wanted to live off the grid, so we did a few things we regretted later. One of many. The worst, in my opinion, was disposing of the washing machine. There were at least 4 kids in diapers at the time. Needless to say, most of that responsibility fell on the women, I must say, despite our best efforts. And we also ripped out the phone at one point, thinking, I don't know what. Nonetheless, we were fearless in our attempts to create a new kind of life for ourselves and our children. It was clear from the start Barbara was the one, the matriarch, a leader. She took initiative in organizing household and farm work assignments, in planning our 1-acre garden, and in organizing the many visitors who arrived during the warm months to help with things like sugaring, harvesting, and canning our food. Barbara was the one who always maintained a cool head and could be counted on in an emergency. My daughters, Beth and Adrian, recalled a time when Dylan stepped on a nest of bees and got stung many times. And the kids still remember Barbara's cool head in dealing with the situation. She just took him to the stream and put his foot in the stream to cool it off, to ease his pain. Barbara was the one that introduced me to the women's movement and showed me I had a life of my own to live beyond that of wife and mother. She spoke clearly and forcefully about expanding our roles as women at our women's meetings and at our endless house meetings. She was always encouraging us to try new things, as she did herself. As you may know, she decided to become a midwife. I'm not sure if this was her first time birthing a baby, but I remember accompanying her to a childbirth at Glover Commune. There were folks gathered around a campfire when we arrived. They were singing softly and just outside the birthing hut. When the time neared, we, Barbara and I, entered the hut along with the mother, and she was in a squatting position. I was so nervous and excited but Barb spoke gently and was concentrated on the task at hand. It was a magnificent outcome, a lovely little baby girl. I thought, what bravery and courage these two women showed. They were role models for me. You'll hear more, I'm sure, about these character traits of Barbara from others today, as she demonstrated them in many other aspects of her life. She was a real trailblazer. I'm honored to celebrate my old and dear friend today.
Okay, hello. I'm Bridget. I met Barb in 1970. We both lived communally. She lived in Franklin, and I lived on the Mount Philo commune in Charlotte. We didn't become close friends until we began the free clinic together. At the gathering of the tribes, we decided the way we were going to change the world was to provide health care for people. It was not a privilege, it was a right. And we were going to see this through. So a group of about 12 of us rented a storefront in the Old North End and opened the People's Free Clinic. We had a group of about 4 volunteer doctors, a nurse, and some physician's assistants, and we trained along the way. I'm not going to be able to fully illustrate this, but it was quite the time. All of that was. Barbara, throughout this whole time, was the stalwart pillar of this organization. While we would waver, okay, we would go, what the heck are we doing? She would say, we know what we're doing, and we're going to continue to do it. And so we got more training. We were open 4 nights a week. We were available by phone for 2 hours every afternoon. We chased lower rents all over Burlington. We moved 3 or 4 times until not the final, but the next to final place that the free clinic was. And we just kept on working. We all did it collectively. We worked in the lab, we worked as in reception, and we did primary care. While Barb was committed to primary care, her real interest was in education. And by the second year we existed, we provided classes in nutrition, in prenatal care, in dental care, in parasitology. That was me. It's hard to imagine how much we did. We had weekend retreats for people providing rural care. And this just continued on as the clinic dealt with its trials and tribulations. And there were financial trials, there were staffing trials. We just continued to pursue what we knew was right and correct. Then from there, as most of you know, I think anyway, that with the assistance of Bernie Sanders and other committed people, the People's Free Clinic morphed into the Community Health Center of Burlington, and now are the 8 community health centers in the state of Vermont. I cannot I really can't overstate Barb's place in this, because she was just, for me, a real, I was like 3 years younger, but for me, she was the adult. I turned to her when I had questions. I turned to her when I needed some definition for something I was doing, and she was always there to strongly deliver. And as I think Hannah or Grace said, sometimes it wasn't easy. Sometimes it wasn't easy at all, but I always learned from it and grew. And that's what I thank her for. I thank her for that, and I thank her for being a friend for all these years, and I also thank her for being a visionary who said healthcare is for people, not for profit, and seeing that right on through. Thanks, Barb. Barbara.
If everyone could step forward to speak.
Oh, sure.
So don't unless you need to say. For the video.
So hi, everybody. I'm Larry Kupferman. I'm surprised. Well, anyway, I'm really glad to be able to help remember some of the early days before the co-op became Onion River Co-op, and remember Barb's role in that. John Ment reminded me just last night that People's Free Clinic was located on North Winooski Avenue. I think we saw a great picture of it just before this one. And across the street was Babipa. And if folks remember Babipa, you do? I still don't know what Babipa stands for, by the way. I'm still trying to figure that out. If you know, let us know. Which was the first real distribution and store for the co-op, which was actually just one big, large buying group at the time. Barb would come back and forth depending on activities in each site. I looked at a transcript of Vermont Historical Society audio log, part of their Vermont 1970s counterculture project, and Barb's involvement with the Franklin Commune in Franklin, Vermont. Kate Bluffson interviewed, and here's an excerpt. She asked Barb to tell about relationships with other counterculture people in Vermont. Barb mentions friends in Putney, the Dreamers in Montgomery, and sharing food and talking with them about getting a gathering together, and that was mentioned earlier. Went around to communes, invited people to this meeting in August of, she thought, 1971 at the time. They met on a hill, lots of produce from gardens, cooked and ate together for one weekend, met in small groups, and food purchasing, healthcare rights, newspapers, and communication was topics. Barb talked at length in this interview about the outcomes from these groups, the cooperative food purchasing, People's Free Clinic. She describes in detail the founding of the People's Free Clinic in Burlington. So it's worth having a look at that archive. Certainly food co-ops sprung up all over the state, and many of them enjoying expansions and strong community support now. I also just learned, Fran Cohen, who's here, mentioned to me that Jim Nolfi was a professor of a group of students at UVM. This is when I became involved. I wasn't a student at UVM, but tangentially involved in this fairly sizable group, including Lars Larson, John Ment, Betsy Gentili. Those are the folks that I remember, and I'm sure there were many others. Started a buying group. And by the time I got involved in around 1972 or 3, there was already a truck going to Boston or New York and to St. Johnsbury to Hatches for their granola. People remember Hatches in St. Johnsbury? Great spot, right? This group that I was involved with at the time needed a distribution site, and it just grew from there as one distribution site or another became available, and we saw pictures of Archibald Street, which was the first real warehouse for a while. Barb's interview mentions moving from Franklin to Westford and intermittently to Mount Philo Commune with the children. And I think that was a big part of their work at the time, is making sure the children were being well cared for. But it would be remiss for me not to mention Susan Meacham in our conversation, who was a real role model for many of us in those times. A member of the co-op in the earliest days, and I'm sure close friends with Barb. Some words to remember Barbara by: communard, community, back to the land, mother and a friend and an organizer. Thank you.
Uh-oh. Oops. Well, my name is Helen Keith, and it's a privilege to be here. Because I'm not sad, exactly, because I was so lucky to have Barbara in my life for so long. And I had some problems with my printer, so therefore I'm trying to be up to snuff here electronically. And I just want to go back to the interment ceremony, because there was a poem that was read there. I'm going to read it again, but I'm going to take off from that. And thank you, Hannah. I believe it was you that found it. It's called "Do Not Stand at My Grave and Weep" by Mary Elizabeth Fry. And I may have to sit down because I'm not used to standing this long. Do not stand at my grave and weep. I'm not there. I do not sleep. I am 1,000 winds that blow. I am the diamond glints on snow. I am the sunlight on ripened grain. I am the gentle autumn rain. When you awaken in the morning's hush, I am the swift uplifting rush of quiet birds in circled flight. I am the soft stars that shine at night. Do not stand at my grave and cry. I'm not there. I did not die. So that was my jump-off point for some personal comments. I've known Barbara for a really long time. I got to know her actually through all the connections that came out of Ethan Allen Child Care Center, the kids and the adults in that thriving, wonderful place. So she's alive in me, in us. We carry her with us as we are part of her. Children, connections, moving always to improve things for our and others' humanity, justice, and service. She has and I put this in the present sense because I do believe she's here. She has an uncanny knack for knowing when to be patient, when to laugh, when to move like a quiet laser. She had a systems approach, and actually I haven't heard that use of words yet, but that's what a lot of people are talking about. She had this view of how things ought to be, and she would move to learn new things so she could help make that happen. And the key thing that I think of is the People's Free Clinic, because it spawned now all of these amazing healthcare centers throughout Vermont and elsewhere. And I believe that was the precursor. So I'm going to say it was. She was well schooled in housing, in food collectives, in health services, in lay midwifery, just in but also on the edges of movements for change. She went to get the skills she felt she needed to be so useful. Her efforts in women's health, oh Lord, this thing's jumping all over the place. I think I'm going to have to give it up. Stop. Stop. Anyway, we had the best times when we would go out dancing. I have to go into this other part because I could always have a partner in a group with many, many, many others, but it might just start with one or two of us, and she was always part of it. And it was so great to come home after hunts and sweating like crazy and having really exhausted ourselves and listened to good music. So I just really want to say her focus was kids, her focus was women, her focus was relationships and improving the lives of so many people. And also I learned with her good friend, I got to know Jane Van Loon. And it was Jane and Barbara and I in the woods where I first saw my first trillium.
Hi, I'm Susan Schoenfeld. I met Barb in 1976. I was 24 years old, and my partner and I decided to have a baby. And at the time, we both worked at the Onion River Food Co-op, and at that time, that meant you had no money, you had no health insurance, but I don't think we ever felt that was a barrier. And I'd done enough starting to read about births that I knew I didn't want to have a hospital experience. I only wanted to have medical interventions if they were absolutely needed. I wanted to try to have a natural birth. So how did you even do that? And lucky enough, there was an option, and it was the lay midwife group that Barb was a leader of. And that group of women had got together I think starting several years before. I talked to Phyllis Stambolian, who gave me a little background information. But they met weekly, teaching themselves about midwifery, working with their consulting doctors, and just learning the skills they needed to provide home birth options for people here. When I learned about the birth group and I learned about Barb, I knew that that's what I wanted to do. And when you start talking about, I think Dawn asked me to come and talk about my home birth. And the thing is, it's so much, a home birth experience is so much more than the birth. And I know for me, as a pretty young mother at the time, the weeks that you had, the months really, of meeting with the midwives, prenatal visits, preparation classes, and then even what do you have to do for a home birth. I saw several of the midwives, but I really developed a strong tie to Barb. To me, she was just, over the time I became to like and trust her, and that was an important part of it. But also, what I realized later is that she sent that back to me. As we met and as we were getting ready, part of what she did was get you as a person ready to go through this experience. So, which was very important. And part of it was too explaining to you, what's going to happen and how you're going to do things, what could go wrong and what happens if it goes wrong, and just, sort of that building of trust. Barb was part of the delivery of both of our children. We had 2 home births. The first birth was a long and complicated story that I just don't have time to talk about it. And a few of you in the room were there, so you may remember some of that. In the end, our daughter, Emma, was a healthy baby born there, and one of my distinct memories of Barbara was a bath of warm water, and Emma had started crying already, but watching Barbara lay her down in the water, and Emma stopped crying, opened her eyes, and just stretched out. Just kind of I was like, oh. It's one of the first times, only time she wasn't crying for the next week. But anyways, it was great. So 2 years later, we had another home birth. It was much more of a mellow experience, afternoon instead of the middle of the night. I remember all went really well up to the very last minute, and when I was pushing the baby out and heard Barbara say, don't hold off the push, umbilical cord's around the neck, it's tight, hold off the push. Oh, okay, everything's fine, deliver your baby. And we're like, and so I then had this my second healthy, beautiful daughter with us, and that just the calmness, the patience, the knowledge of getting us through that was really important. It's hard to convey the bond you feel with your midwife, and I think it's probably through the months of preparation and then through the birth, and it's probably even more intense with a home birth, I assume. It was really empowering for me, supportive, and it was a really pivotal time in my life to move into that space as a mother, but it was much more than that because Barb was so much more than that. So I really felt that she showed me, she was one of a really early example to me of what a woman could be, about what it meant to own your own power, what it meant to be a part of a community of women, and really to have a child, have a work life, have a political view and a communal view of yourself as a person and live in community. And I think those were the things she imparted to me the most, and I'm forever grateful. So.
Wow, what a tribe. This is like going back, 30 years, seeing some of your faces here. I did ask Barbara Nolfi if I could call her Barb, and she said I could. So my name's Melinda Moulton. Barb Nolfi agreed to be my midwife back in 1977. I wanted a home birth. Barb coached me and guided me through my pregnancy. She was deeply knowledgeable. She lived close to the earth, and she approached my care with the wisdom of an all-knowing old soul. After the baby was born, I asked Barb to use a satin ribbon that belonged to my husband's grandmother to tie off the umbilical cord. Barb was hesitant, but she agreed. When it was all over, we fried up the placenta with lots of butter, onions, and garlic. We believed in the health benefits, and humans are the only mammal that does not eat its placenta. And it is the only meat that comes from birth and not from death. Now, back then, living close to the land, we wanted to be true to our animal instincts, and Barb Nolfi supported us in every way. She was one of us. After a time, everyone headed home, and we were alone in this special moment. But when we checked on the newborn, the satin tie had slipped from the umbilical, and there was blood everywhere. We freaked out and ran to the phone, and we rang up Barb. She picked up the phone and calmly said, "No worries. I tossed a plastic umbilical clamp on the table before I left." We used the clamp, and all was well. Isn't that so typical of Barb? Calm, confident, and always a step ahead of the rest of us. My daughter Mariah is now 46 years old, and every time we would run into Barb, they would hug and chat about that amazing day. I know there are so many stories like that with all of you here today. She was a remarkable woman. She was a pioneer for the rights of women and those disenfranchised, and she stood up and she never wavered for a cause that she believed in. Barb was courageous and powerful. She did not live a life of platitudes. What she said she meant, and what she did she stood behind. She had no problem stepping into the fray if that meant it made things better for those who were in need. When I told my daughter Mariah that I would be speaking here today in honor of Barb and telling the story about her birth, she responded with, "I loved Barb Nolfi. She was such a badass."
I didn't know I was going last. I'm Dan Albert, and I figured it out. Barbara and I have been friends for 51 years. And I've been asked to talk about friendship today. And I've been allotted 2 minutes. So I figure that's 120 seconds. That's 2.3 seconds for each year of our friendship. So I'm going to try to do this quickly. I met Barbara under a maple tree next to the gazebo at 40th and Allen, where the Ethan Allen Child Care Center was running a summer program for school-age kids. And Dylan, believe it or not, was about 6 years old and was enrolled there. And I was the director of the center. Barbara ended up moving from married student housing at 40th and Allen, I thought, to the Red House in Westford, just 2 miles down the road from where I lived. And Barbara and I hit it off. We both liked Motown. And over many years, we danced together at many parties. We both liked volleyball, and we played weekly on a court in the backyard of my house in the woods. We had similar politics. We participated in political actions together, including some clandestine work. Only a few years after Barbara and I met and became friends, she caught my oldest daughter, Sadie, as she entered the world. And that very same day, as Barbara was being an active midwife, about a half mile away, the house that she was living in, renting, it actually burned down to the ground. Yesterday, Sadie drove up here from New York City to be here to honor Barbara, who caught her on July 4th, 1975. But that all is context. The core of what I want to say about friendship is this. Barbara was such a good friend to me that she didn't hesitate to call me on my shit. And she told me when petty bickering was clouding the environment, when my petty bickering was clouding the environment. And perhaps the best example is a little longer one, but 10 years ago, Susan and I moved to Burlington Cohousing, which obviously Barbara and Don were instrumental in getting started. And they had already been living there for about 7 years, and I was a newcomer. And on this particular day, Barbara and I had been friends for about 40 years, and she was the head cook for one of the Cohousing common meals. And I was helping with some last-minute touches in the setup. Always helpful, I spotted a small commercial yogurt container on one of the dining room tables, and I tossed it. What is that doing there, you know? Turns out, Bajaya, who is here, I saw her come in, one of our neighbors had spent 8 hours making a special sauce, a Nepali sauce for the dinner, and I had just tossed it. And Barbara, she figured out what had happened, and she responded directly. She responded honestly. She responded vividly and passionately and oh so loudly. Dan, what the fuck did you do? Still friends.
Hi, I'm Liz Curry, and it's been really incredibly moving to listen to the stories of Barbara's peers. As someone who's from the next generation, I want to talk about Barbara's political life, but I'm honored that Don asked me to do that. I'm not the most worthy person to do that. There are many people here who worked side by side with Barbara up until her last days, staying committed to the Progressive First Coalition and then the Progressive Party. And over the past week, I have heard many of their stories, and because my short-term memory is better than my long-term memory, I can kind of touch on a few of those things. But I first met Barbara when I was graduating from UVM, and she was a comrade for those of us who stayed here because it was the socialist revolution. And I graduated in 1985, and I had come here because my boyfriend at the time had told me that we had a mayor who you could just walk into his office and talk to him about anything. And I just, having grown up in Washington, D.C., just couldn't believe that. Not only could you talk to him about anything, but you could talk to him about socialism. And I was just really enamored by that. So when I graduated, after being registered to vote by Peter Lukowski, I moved to Ward 3 in 1988 and bought my first house, luckily, on the street where Barbara and Don lived, on Peru Street, and we had a little kind of progressive stronghold there in that neighborhood. And Barb Pride and I volunteered to co-manage her campaign. I bet Barb probably twisted my arm a little bit to do that because Barb had been certainly an incredible activist way before me. So we collaborated on the campaign, and it was the first time I really got to know Barbara and learned just what a phenomenal visionary and person she was, learned so much about all of the stories that we've heard. And every time I would have a moment to sit with her, a quiet moment in the kitchen, she would tell me something else about what she had done and how she had founded all of the institutions that I was so excited about being in Burlington for. The health clinic, the co-op, the Burlington Women's Council, which I was a member of at the time, and she cheered those of us who were housing and tenants' rights activists on like nobody else. She was just right there for us. And so she began her political career with all of this incredible experience and vision under her belt. And what I learned first about Barbara is what an amazing listener she was. And her favorite thing to do was we had 5 senior high-rises in Ward 3, which is most of the ones in the city. And her favorite thing to do is we would set up these meetings with the seniors for Barbara to go meet with them and talk with them about the campaign and platform and issues. And she would bask in those moments of listening to them, and they loved her, and it was just a really wonderful kind of progressive practice that we started. We really got off the ground. And so that was always very rewarding. And then Barbara had a real aversion to door knocking. Not only was it the 2 coldest months of the year when everybody would get out there and knock on doors, back when it was really freezing. And so Barb and I devised a plan to have a buddy system and signed up people to go with Barbara. So the first time I went out with her, I could see her in action and, kind of thought she might need a little coaching, but we'd knock on the doors and she would open the conversation by saying, "What are your thoughts? What are you worried about?" And then she would proceed to listen. And very intently, I would stand and watch her and start to get really anxious because we were breaking the Terry Berish's 3-minute rule. And I wasn't really sure what to do, like how to politely say, we have to move on. So I would try and find a break in the conversation, and I would kind of just in the shortest time possible tell the person everything about Barbara there was possibly to say about her platform, the issues, what she cared about, and just kind of cram it all in there. And Barbara would politely nod, and we'd leave the home, and then she'd turn to me and say, "Are you the candidate or am I?" Loved that about Barbara. I loved the way she balanced that directness as a woman after my own heart with her deeply compassionate listening skills. And, listening to the stories today, I wish she had been with me at my home birth, but I knew that, she always loved to hear everything about those of us who were kind of the next generation. And I know from talking with Barb Prine about her work with Barbara up until Barbara, as long as Barbara could still attend progressive steering committee meetings, she was going to attend. And she was that kind of political mentor for so many. And so many counselors who came after her, she was exemplary in the way she would listen deeply, study the issues, ask people everything she could, and then she would say what she thought, and she was almost always right. Probably just she was always right. And one little vignette I heard this week is that I was talking to Erhard Mahnke, and I mentioned something about Barbara being on the city council, and he goes, "Well, it wasn't called the city council then." It was like, "Oh yeah, it was the board of aldermen." Well, of course, Barbara was the one who came up with the name city council, so she took care of that problem.
Thank you all. We have one more surprise member of the panel, and that is our Senator Bernie Sanders.
Thank you. It is moving to be here, to see people and to hear names that I have not heard for a very long time, and to know in many ways that the people in this room kind of grew up together through some very tumultuous times. Barbara clearly was an exceptional person, and as you have heard, she was a visionary. And I think sometimes it's important in these tough political times to remember how much people like Barbara have in fact not only changed the state, but change the country. When we talk about the Free People's Clinic on Winooski Street, know there are about 180,000 Vermonters now getting health care through community health centers. When we talk about healthy food and organic agriculture, back in the 60s and 70s, those were not concepts that a whole lot of people were familiar with. And right now, I think all over the country, there's a growing understanding of the dangers of what the food industry does in terms of our health. In terms of progressive politics, there are about 100 members of the Progressive Caucus in Washington right now fighting the right fights for economic and social justice and ending bigotry and women's rights. In terms of health care and midwifery, Barbara was a leader in demanding that women have a major role in how their babies were going to be born. In terms of housing, we have made progress. So as we think back about all the struggles that we have gone through, understand that in so many ways, Barbara and other Barbaras have transformed this country. Back then, when Barbara was active, there may be 1 or 2 women in the United States Senate. Within a few years, half the Senate will be women. There will be women presidents and so forth. That didn't happen by accident. Concern about the environment did not happen by accident. It happened because people stood up and took on powerful special interests and talked about the importance of not conquering nature, but living with nature. So in all of these issues, women's rights, health care, child care, my son was at the Danny Albert's Child Care Center at 40th and Allen. And all of these interests, concerns about the kids. We struggled. We've lost some major fights, but we have helped, through people like Barbara, to transform this country in many, many ways and make it a very different country than it was. So Barbara, I know you are here also. Thank you all for your leadership and for your visions. Thanks.
you may have guessed, but the singer was Hannah. We're going to have another short video of Barbara and then go on with the program.
My experience of that was very special, and I'm quite supportive of alternative kinds of home or alternative kinds of birth, especially the kind that you can have in the home, as long as you can have attendants there to increase the safety of that. So I guess that I would like to take the opportunity to just say that I think that Judy Chicago's renderings, her paintings, really do give you an idea of the strength and the beauty that's in that event.
So we're going to end the program with reflections from Dylan and last thoughts from Don. Though I'm making an executive decision as MC to read you a poem. It's a poem that I wrote for Barbara and Don recently. It's called Suffering Fools. Barbara doesn't suffer fools, I said to Don. This was 2 months before we lowered her into the fresh ground near the beehives. It's amazing that she puts up with me, he replied with his typical twinkle. I was there at the beginning, after all, when Barbara answered Don's personal ad that included lovemaking among his favorite pastimes, with hiking and homesteading. If Don was chocolate, Barbara was steel, guiding into this world years of babies and institutions. She kept a keen eye on the bottom line, but couldn't see disease creeping up. She raised her hand again and again until she could hardly lift her spoon. Even then, trapped in her body, she would feed Don the answers to their daily crossword. We are all suffering fools, of course, in the direct Buddhist sense, on a one-way track to death and heartache. But look, don't you see that photo of Barbara? Sly, sweet smile, just a day before the last day. And listen, did you hear her deep chuckle when we realized that the hole we had dug wasn't long enough or wide enough for her big spirit?
Hi, I'm Dylan. I'm Barbara's son, I guess. And I know many of you. I've known many of you for years, grown up with you. I don't have prepared remarks, but I wanted to talk about Barbara as a parent. She was a very devoted parent, and at the same time, you know, we have helicopter parents now, people who make sure that their kids aren't exposed to any danger. Well, that was not Barbara's style. I think who was it mentioning the bees in the mud? So yeah, I have a memory of that as well. I had been playing in a barn and I stepped on a beehive that was in a bale of hay, and my mom picked me up with bees stinging her and carried me into a stream and covered me with mud. And for a while, it was just the two of us. And then, you know, Don and Barbara met, and we were a bigger family. And this is the best photo I could find of the four of us together, but this is Don's farm. I guess I've thought a lot about Barbara and my disconnection from her as a 56-year-old man, and how I've had the opportunity to get to know her again through going through this process of looking at photos and talking with Don, and hearing all of you talk about her. I think I probably took her for granted, as many children take their parents for granted. But I think she was a phenomenal parent, and she let me make a lot of mistakes myself and learn from those mistakes, hopefully, or maybe make them again and again. But she wasn't going to intercede and tell me not to do something. Anyway, we are now into the next presentation. But thanks anyway, and here you go, Don.
Wow. This is a hard act to follow, really. So much of what I want to say has been said. So, it's sort of like I went to the legislature at one point and was puzzled by what was happening, and somebody said to me, everything's been said, but not everyone has said it. Okay. So Barbara wrote, in 2002, Barbara wrote an epitaph for herself in her journal. She felt things deeply. I do not know exactly why she wrote that at that time, but it was really true. It underlines so much of her character. Her feelings about everything were so deep that she had to pay attention to them and express them. Her authenticity essentially came from those deep feelings. She was the quintessential authentic person. She was a real deal. She called things as she saw them, and often bluntly. Among other things, and she was tough with me too. Among other things, the minor things, she would remind me, Don, you talk too much. She loved people deeply and was totally fascinated by human behavior. She was very animated and spoke with her eyes and face and body. If she flashed her smile at you, all you could do is give in and melt in that beam. Like her stepdaughter, Hannah, she was quick to find humor in things and laugh. I'm going to let you hold this. Ask for it if I need it. She might get angry with someone, but then she was done and did not hold grudges. Even in private, she rarely dwelled on people's faults. As one friend said of Barbara, she was an acquired taste, and that was Dan. It was. Anyone who appreciated her directness and boldness found a close friend for life. Her feeling things strongly made Barbara one tough mother, or as someone said, a force to be reckoned with. She could be very direct and brutally honest. That was very hard for some folks, especially if they were meeting her for the first time. Others said that Barbara was often the adult in the room. In cohousing meetings, when some people could not hear, Barbara would be the first one to yell out, "Speak up, use the mic." She was not a perfectionist. In some ways, she was quite comfortable with good enough for now. However, probably as a result of her strong feelings, she was a fuss budget. She wanted her eggs cooked a certain way, or toast without holes, and on and on and on. I was okay with that. It was refreshing to live with someone who could tell me exactly what they really wanted. It made living with her so much easier and more fun. Still, how did a person like me manage to get through her fuss budget filter? Was it a matter of the good enough for now loophole? Along these lines, she was quite tolerant towards humans, but not necessarily towards other living species. If she were goddess of the universe, she would order a serious depletion of diversity among living species. Mosquitoes, box elders, English sparrows, and many other creatures she had issue with. I let her know that I was glad she was not the goddess of the universe. If you never engaged Barbara in a game, even one as simple as Uno, or you might have no idea how strongly competitive she could be. She did not like to lose. It was that simple. Even at first when we started doing crossword puzzles together, it felt very competitive until we figured out ways to work together on them, which we did every day except Sunday. Some of the competitiveness may have been underneath an amazing graduation speech she gave at Trinity College's Business School for Women, where she urged the graduates to get in touch with their anger and use that energy to bring their dreams to fruition. Now, I want to talk a little about Barbara and my friendship. Single Vermonters was an early dating service that relied on ads that folks wrote for themselves and then were published monthly in a women's only and a men's only list. In August 1982, Barbara and I, independently of course, signed up for Single Vermonters. And this is her ad. I didn't intend for you to know about my ad. Someone leaked that out. Oh, wait, we're jumping ahead here. Go back to the ad if you can. Okay. So, 37, divorced, 5'6". By the way, she wasn't 37, okay? She wasn't always totally honest. 125 pounds, beautiful, that was true, unique, intelligent woman, dark-haired with blue eyes, shy. Seeks companionship for fun, humor, love. Prefer man aged 33 to 43 who likes kids. And I was looking for a family. I was looking for women that had children. I have a teenage son. He's warm, romantic, energetic. I like volleyball, bicycling, the NBA, being outdoors, thinking, laughing, many kinds of music, dancing. My work is in healthcare. For our first date, I showed up in a wreck of a car and took Barbara and Dylan out to dinner at Tortilla Flats. Okay. Much later, when I asked her about her first impressions of me, she said, "You held your glove compartment shut with a screwdriver." I knew then that there was nothing pretentious about you. We almost immediately knew that we had both had won the lottery big time, but we still decided to go slow and take our time getting to know each other. 10 days after we met, I was working late on some computer programming when Barbara called to say, "I just made an apple pie. Would you like to come to my place and share the apple pie with me?" I did. I stayed, and I never left. Yeah. In our 42 wonderful years together, we sought therapy 3 times from our friend Diano. The first time was early in our relationship. I had come out of 2 marriages and was struggling with the concept of commitment. So Barbara set up our first counseling session for us to come to grips with that issue. She then proceeded to ask for my hand in marriage. She was not one to let grass grow under her feet. From that came our commitment ceremony. These are the vows that we made to each other. I pledge to share my life with you openly and playfully, to speak the truth to you in love. I will tenderly care for you and enthusiastically encourage your own fulfillment without limits through all the changes of our lives. We will grow older together, always alert, connected, and having fun. I would say that we managed to honor those vows very well all these years. I have more, but I could quit. Barbara was a very sensual person, and that trait expressed itself most in the outdoors. She was very aware of colors, sounds, and smells. She found awe and wonder everywhere. She loved watching and listening to birds and finding wildflowers in the woods. She was happy just sitting on a stream bank, listening to the water. She loved that sound so much that we had a fountain by our bed so that she could hear the sound of trickling water all night long. She always knew what phase the moon was in and would often get up in the middle of the night and go out and enjoy it. Barbara's health struggles with atypical Parkinson's started 13 years ago, but she never lost heart. The essential Barbara was always there. To the end, she had her insatiable curiosity, was reading voraciously, doing crossword puzzles, and listening to music. Also still there was her love, her laughter, the twinkle in her eyes, and her infectious smile. Pain, fortunately, was not among her ailments. Through all this, Barbara and I considered ourselves care partners, where Barbara did what she could to care for me, as well as I did for her. For me, Barbara was an extraordinary human being. From our first date to the very day she died. She was my bestest buddy. We had an incredibly wonderful life together. We did so much. We found so much joy and fun in our lives. I will miss her every day for the rest of my life. Farewell, Barbara. Barbara, farewell.
Now it's time for the reception. Please enjoy the spread from Onion River Co-op. Thank you to Onion River. They'll be dancing too. And thank you also to CCTV and Charlie Giannone for getting this on film. Thank you to Main Street Landing for providing this incredible space. And thank you to you all. It's wonderful to see you.
I was just remembering when Barbara was on the city council. She was a councilwoman, and she, in life in general, she always wanted to listen to regular people and anybody who had something to say. But in this case, she had a kitchen cabinet, and I loved it that she called it the kitchen cabinet. It was a cabinet of her advisors, and she had regular people, neighbors, activists, and just anyone who had a perspective so that they could advise her. And they would visit every month or so and advise her on whatever the topics of the city council were, what their perspective was. That's it. It was really cool because it was just a bunch of regular people advising her.
Hi, this is Linda Eyre. I want to say that Barb Nolfi is such an important person, one of the core people in this wonderful group we have in Burlington, our community. All the memories, all the profound things that people have gone through, all the movements. It was wonderful to have Bernie show up, to listen to Dawn, to hear her son, to see those wonderful pictures. Thanks, Barb, or Barbara. I always called you Barb. It was great. Love you. Bye-bye.